welcome to the most excellent 80s movies podcast. It's the podcast where a filmmaker and a comedian chase their way through the hedge maze of the 80s movies we think we love or might have missed with these our grown-up eyes to see how they hold up. This is The Shining, a movie selection from 1980 about which Google says Jack Torrance, played by Jack Nicholson, becomes winter caretaker at the isolated Overlook Hotel in Colorado, hoping to cure his writer's block. He settles in alongside his wife, Wendy, played by Shelley Duvall, and his son, Danny, played by Danny Lloyd, who's plagued by psychic premonitions. As Jack's writing goes nowhere and Danny's visions become more disturbing, Jack discovers the hotel's dark secrets and begins to unravel into a homicidal maniac hell-bent on terrorizing his family. And that's what the Google says about The Shining. I'm Krissy Lenz, director of the Neighborhood Comedy Theater in downtown Mesa, Arizona, and with me is filmmaker.
I'm Nathan Blackwell. I'm an independent filmmaker with Squishy Studios.
And so, Nathan, what is your history with The Shining? Have you seen this movie a million times?
So I would call this one of my top horror films. I haven't seen it a million times. I've probably seen it 3 times.
Okay.
I feel like Stanley Kubrick's films are not necessarily ones you watch over and over and over again, at least for me personally. Like, they have to have a certain power and impact, and often I need to kind of step back from it, you know, and when I come back to it, the novelty and effect of it is strong again, you know. Like 2001 and it's just, I mean, pretty much everything he's done. But yeah, I would say this was one of the horror. This is more up my alley in terms of it's more supernatural dread and suspense rather than like blood or, you know.
Yeah, there's very little blood.
Yeah, this is more of the, it's...
Unless you count the blood that gets off the elevator at the first floor.
Although, damn it, I do love The Thing, which is pretty gross and gory, but it's also
The Thing is like as gross as you can get. That's a 10 out of 10 on the grossness scale.
I think part of the thing is that it's also kind of sci-fi. It's also kind of adventure, along with being like a suspense and a horror, you know?
And Kurt Russell's in it.
Yeah, and Kurt Russell's hair is in it.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, The Shining, I'd put The Shining at the top of my list in terms of horror films, because of that kind of supernatural dread. I also just really enjoy a haunted house movie. You know?
And it's extra fun when that haunted house is a giant hotel.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen this movie at least 10 times.
Wow.
And I don't know why. I guess just because it's a really good horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
But this time I watched it with my 13-year-old.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah. And he enjoyed it. Like he was of course scared by the scene with the twins where they're all come play with us, Danny. Come play with us. And I made him not look during the whole scene with the naked lady.
You have to be 14 to see this.
Yeah.
Don't look.
Cover your eyes. But he liked it. He didn't think it was scary, but he thought it was suspenseful.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that the perfect time to see a Kubrick film is like an hour before your bedtime. And so you're still watching it past your bedtime, and then you start to kind of become a little lucid, you know, because they usually go like 2.5 hours is like the shortest like Kubrick film. I feel like they're all,
which is so long.
Yeah, and the pacing is methodical and deliberate and suspenseful, and he does a lot. He doesn't do a lot of coverage. He does a lot of long shots, and so even it's 2.5 hours compared to another 2.5, it feels slow. But that's but it's I'd say it's a good thing, you know. But if you're a little sleepy and you're a little lucid, it starts to kind of become a little more dreamlike, you know.
Yeah. Well, we were watching this before bed
Mm-hmm.
because I'm a good parent.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we start this movie like a lot of 80s movies start with a road trip with just a car driving up a road.
There's so much heavy lifting that the music does in this movie, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and we get so much just foreboding and dread at the beginning with, you know, dun 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 dun, you know, and it's just a helicopter shot of beautiful landscape moving slowly and methodically through that gives you the sense that something is building and winding up. But if it was like a Simon and Garfunkel song, it would have just replaced out of it. Like during the whole sequence, there's nothing inherently dreadful in the
A VW
imagery.
bug driving up a street.
Yeah, of the imagery of like cross country driving. Credit really has to be given to the music in this movie because
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of relentless and it's always building and it's always kind of creeping around a corner, and it's not really a ton of jump scares. It's just like this slow moving machine of this thing just kind of continually moving down the hallway.
Yep. So there are title sequences in the version that I watched. I don't know if that's like a director's cut thing or if that's a different cut than usual, but did yours have that? Where it's like
uh
the interview.
yes, I had that.
Okay. So Jack is going for an interview at the Overlook Hotel, and Mom is at home just doing her daily reading of Catcher in the Rye while chain
Mhm.
smoking.
uh
And Danny, the little boy, has an imaginary friend named Tony,
yeah,
who's a little finger wagging boy.
he's the boy that lives in his mouth.
He lives in his mouth. Um, so we learned that the hotel is closed from October to May because the road is undrivable.
Yeah, 25 miles of road. It's just too costly.
Yep. And so there's a tremendous sense of isolation that comes over you. And of course, we have to tell Jack that the old caretaker axed his whole family and then killed himself. So it's a great job.
But lots of free time,
So
flexible
much,
hours.
so much free time. The hours are flexible, but they are total.
Yes. Yeah, it's so it's like it's so fascinating because the imagery everyone imprints on is obviously when, you know, they're isolated and everyone's losing their mind.
Mm-hmm.
So fascinating to see the hotel bright and green everywhere and full of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that you really get revisiting it again of just the stark difference.
Yep. So Danny's in the bathroom talking to Tony, and Tony's like, "Your dad already got the job, but you're not gonna like it at the hotel." And he shows him the blood pouring out of the elevator.
Yeah. He shows him a clip show of scenes from the movie The Shining.
Yep.
And it's interesting because as the movie develops, you realize that basically he's got a power. It's like a psychic
Mm-hmm.
power. And I feel like, you know, it's not said in the movie, but I feel like this is just the way of his brain. Like there is no little boy. It's just the power inside him manifesting and kind of
Right.
protecting him, you know?
Right. I
So
always wondered though if Tony was like a ghost that was helping him.
right. Yeah. That's a good question. Yeah, the movie doesn't answer that. And I'm just going off of the movie. You know, obviously this is written by Stephen
Stephen King.
King, who famously hated this adaptation, even though it's better than the TV movie that they made that was more
Mm-hmm.
faithful.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a very this was a very personal story. You know, it's ultimately about you know a writer because Jack
Right.
Nicholson is trying to be a writer. He's not really a writer. He's trying to be a writer, you know,
Mm-hmm.
dealing with his family, dealing with alcoholism, you know, and basically cracking and losing it. You could kind of say that the whole thing is a metaphor for Stephen King's life at a certain point, you know,
Right.
of being like the dad who feels like his identity is more about the thing he wants to do rather than the family.
Right. What he wants to be, and like they're standing in his way, obviously.
Right. And that part of him that believes that, and then the part of them that's fighting against that.
Mm-hmm. So Danny has to be seen by a doctor because the blood getting off the elevator gave him a seizure.
Mm-hmm.
And then we learn from Wendy telling the doctor that a few years back, Jack had injured Danny accidentally, quote unquote, but like completely dislocated his shoulder. And from that day forward, had decided to stop drinking and hadn't had drink in, what does she say, 8 months or something. He's basically not been drinking. So off we go to the Overlook. We drive in the bug. We get there on closing day. There's so much luggage, and the Torrances have brought so much luggage with them. He's like, "Did you bring your luggage?" I'm like, "How did they fit that all?" Plus the three of them in a VW bug. I don't believe it. I don't buy it. That's part of the supernatural aspect of this movie. There's no way they got more than one suitcase in the back of that VW.
I'm sure it's explained in the book.
I'm sure that's what we'll put. We'll put an asterisk on everything that doesn't make sense for this. It was explained in the book. So they go on a tour of the hotel. There's a huge hedge maze. There's a game room where Danny sees the twins. Come play with us, Danny. They meet Dick Halloran for a tour of the kitchen,
Mm-hmm.
and he
Scatman
knows
Crothers.
Scatman Crothers,
Gotta
who's so
love Scatman.
charming.
Gotta love Scatman Crothers.
Yeah,
We don't have to talk about it now, but we have to talk about at some point Scatman Crothers, how
apartment.
his bedroom in particular.
Yes.
All right, continue.
So he knows that Danny has The Shining, and he talks to him in his mind
Mm-hmm.
and feeds him ice cream, and they talk about how the hotel is kind of like a place, and some places shine and some places don't.
Mm-hmm.
And he says there's something bad here in room 237. You're scared of it. And he's like, I'm not scared of it, but don't you ever go in room 237.
Yeah. This story could have just been a haunted house story. But by adding in The Shining, by adding in this ability that the kid has, and then saying that this exists in the world, it's now adding a whole new dimension to the story. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's not just them, jumping at scarers. It's also this, this, this kind of, you know, uh, this window of the supernatural world that kind of then, um, lets him, it's like we have the kid freaking out knowing what's going to happen, but also us freaking out at what the kid's going through, and having that part of us as an adult saying, what's wrong with my kid,
Yeah.
And it could have been too much, but instead they totally complement each other and add to each other.
Mm-hmm. There's also a lot of tricycle riding in this movie. It's a very trike heavy movie.
Mm-hmm.
When we come back, it's 1 month later, and Danny is just riding his little tricycle. How did they get the tricycle up there?
It was in the book. It was explained in the book.
Okay. He's riding his trike all around. Mom brings Jack breakfast. And Jack talks about how he fell in love with the place from the moment he saw it. He just knew it was going to be around every corner, and he just knew this was the place for him. It was the place he needed to be. But he's sleeping until like 11:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Mom and Danny are exploring. They go in the maze. Jack just wanders around. It's Tuesday. Wendy cooks. Danny rides around. Jack types. Danny finds room 237.
Yeah. We're already building mystery and suspense around room 237
Yep.
because as all the audience knows, that's where the zombies from Ready Player One live.
Right, exactly. Thursday, it's snowy. Wendy and Danny scamper around in the snow. Jack just stares out the window. Saturday, Jack types. Wendy tries the phone, and the phones aren't working, so she has to use the radio to call the Rangers.
Yeah, at this point, like Shelley Duvall is, I feel like is actually doing all the work.
Yeah, she
Like
is.
he, Jack is just now treating this like I don't remember him ever doing any of the actual like maintenance and work.
No, like he's never checking the boilers, which is a big part of it, right? Because like in
Mhm.
the book, the Overlook like blows up or something because of the boilers,
Obviously.
or something to do with like him needing to check the boilers, and they don't show him doing it, but Wendy is doing it, of course.
Mhm. Yep. Mom.
So Danny encounters the twins, and they show him themselves being all axed up. And they're like, "Come play with us, Danny. Come play with us."
Yeah, so the home is the oh, he skipped over. It's like when he's getting the tour of the Overlook from the manager. It's like, oh yeah, they tell us it's buried on an Indian burial ground.
Yeah.
Whatever. So is this the beginning of the whole like Indian burial ground thing? Is it just this movie and then Poltergeist?
Well, I think that was enough to make the trope happen.
Yeah, and then it became a thing.
Everything's on an Indian burial ground.
Seems like a bad move.
Yeah. Don't bury things where or don't build things where things are buried.
Yeah, I mean, even non-Indian burial grounds, it's just a bad move.
Yeah, any burial ground, stay away. So it's Wednesday. Danny's playing with his cars and a ball rolls up. The door to 237 is open. Jack is having nightmares. He's like in his little writing room, being like, "Oh, oh no, whoa." And Wendy comes to help him, and he's like, "I had a dream that I killed you and Danny."
Yeah, at this
Oops.
point, things are now starting to get intense. We
Yeah.
had a lot of slow dread. We had a lot of like dreams. A lot of the stuff could be explained one way or another that it's in people's minds. But now it starts to get very, the dread and supernatural claws start to hook into them, and
Yep.
and Jack in particular starts becoming unhinged.
Well, so Danny has wandered into 237 and he comes wandering back into the writing room, which is the hotel lobby and he's all like dazed and he's sucking his thumb and he has a hurt neck. And she's like, "Who did this to you? You did this to him." And she immediately accuses Jack,
Mm-hmm.
which is an inciting incident. It's going to make him
Yes,
really mad at her.
it's understandable.
Yep. Jack wanders around and he wanders into the gold room where he hallucinates a
Or does
bartender.
he?
Or does he or doesn't he?
Yeah.
Anyway, he finds a bartender who serves him drinks and he
Mm-hmm.
sort of goes a little crazy.
Mm-hmm. And the bartender is Tyrell, Mr. Tyrell from Blade Runner.
Ah, very nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this is, well, it's that's the question: is it a hallucination or is it ghosts? Like, are ghosts a hallucination? Are they
Right.
influencing his mind, or are they actually there? Like, could they be photographed? I guess that's
Mhm.
the difference. If they're in your mind, if they're affecting the world, you know,
Well, are they giving him booze or not?
yeah,
Like, is he getting drunk on the booze that they're giving him?
right. Is he actually drinking alcohol? because there's no alcohol in the whole joint. They pulled it all out, so they didn't have to pay for their liquor license during the downtime.
So Wendy comes in to find him and she's like, okay, there's a crazy woman in the hotel. I no longer believe that you hurt Danny, but there's a crazy woman in the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we cut to Dick Halloran watching the news, and this is where we get to talk about his apartment.
Yeah, so the Scatman Crothers, so so wonderful. Yeah, he's got basically two paintings, one on either wall of naked African goddesses. You know,
With huge afros and like their boobies out, and they're just resplendent.
it's wonderful.
He's got a pretty swinging place. Like when we see the rest of the
Yeah,
place, it's pretty nice. He's in Florida.
yeah, yeah. So apparently he lives in Miami in the off time, and I just he's he's a swinging cat. I dig
Yep.
it. It's great. It's a great touch.
Yes. So he's getting visions that something is not right at the Overlook Hotel. And he's trying to get a hold of them, but he can't because the phones are down. Meanwhile, Jack is investigating room 237. He finds a naked lady who climbs out of the bathtub and like they go to Smooch City and then she disintegrates into a disgusting old woman who's like all ulcerated and saggy and falling apart. It's probably the scariest part of the whole movie, would you
Yeah.
say?
Yeah. It's definitely the grossest part. It's really when the house is letting its freak flag fly, like
Yeah.
it's now being overt, And I think it's the mom who was killed. That was the British mom who was killed, like the two twins.
Oh.
That's my belief. It doesn't say, but there was a mom who was killed.
Mhm.
But as we later find out, there were many deaths in this household. I mean, in this hotel. It wasn't just the one that they gave him a heads up on. Because as Shelley Duvall is running around the hotel later, there's a whole bunch of freaky stuff going on, and people with head wounds and things like that. So that this was a persistent issue here at the
Yeah.
hotel.
Yeah. Their little sign that says how many days it's been since they had an incident and it never gets past 100.
Yeah. But they said 237. That was where the previous, not the previous caretaker, a past caretaker butchered his family, right?
I don't do they actually say that? I don't think that they actually say that.
But he said he recognized 237 when someone brought it up. So he knew the number, didn't he?
Jack did?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
We've only seen this film like 10 times.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think it's the mom.
Yeah.
And she was just having a tub when he killed her.
Yeah, if she had talked, then we would have known.
Mhm.
Because it turns out that he meets the previous caretaker.
Yes. But he comes back and says there's nothing in 237 and Wendy's like, "We got to get out of here. We got to get him out of here." And he's like, "We can't get out of here. I have obligations." Um we agreed to stay.
Hmm. Which I
So
get.
I get that too.
Hmm.
Yeah, we knew it was going to be no fun.
His sense of honor is triumphing his fear. I get
Yes.
that.
And his
His
sense of
duty.
needing to party then triumphs everything because he goes back to the gold room and finds a whole big party going on there.
Hmm.
And that's when he meets the Delbert Grady, the previous caretaker, who spills drinks on him. So they go to the restroom to clean it up, and
Right.
he's like, "You were the caretaker here, Mr. Grady, and you axed your whole family." And he's like, "No, you've always been the caretaker here."
You've always been here.
Yep. Grady tells Jack that Danny is calling for Halloran using his brain powers.
Mm-hmm.
They unfortunately use the N-word several times.
Mm-hmm. It feels like the ghost was a racist.
Yeah.
And it feels like when Jack said it that he felt uncomfortable repeating the word. But maybe that's just me imprinting, you know.
Maybe.
I feel like really we had a racist ghost, you
Yeah.
know. The movie is obviously, I mean, Scatman Crothers is probably the best character in the movie, so it's obviously
Yeah.
not a racist movie, you know.
But the ghost is a racist.
Yeah, the ghost was racist. Oh man.
So we get this is where the famous red rum scene comes in. So
Yeah.
Grady is like, you have to correct them. They
Mhm.
need to be corrected. You're not correcting them enough. And we cut to Danny, who's like, red rum, red rum, red rum, with his little like
Mhm.
finger thing. And he's like, Danny's not here anymore, Mrs. Torrance. Red rum, red rum, red rum.
There's so many iconic moments in this movie that like I feel like people, even if they hadn't seen The Shining, that have just kind of trickled down and become part of pop culture, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So the red rum is obviously, and I feel like half of these things have appeared in The Simpsons at some point,
Of
you know?
course. The Simpsons
Yeah.
does a beautiful parody of The Shining
Mm-hmm.
called The Shinin.
The Shannon. All right. Yeah. You've got obviously the creepy twins, you know.
Yep.
Things you've got I feel like the all work and no play moment,
Which is coming
um,
up.
which is coming up is definitely the here's Johnny thing peeking through
Mm-hmm.
the cracks. Um yeah, I think
And
obviously
that
blood
was something
elevator.
that blood elevator. Yes, that's odd. Usually the blood gets off on the second floor.
Mhm.
Um, the here's Johnny thing was something that Rocket didn't understand because he obviously didn't understand the Johnny Carson reference, and he's like, his name is Jack. Why is he saying here's Johnny? And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, it's a reference to a TV show. He didn't get that, but it's still famous and iconic.
Mhm. So tell me more about Rocket's experience watching this movie.
He liked it. He was creeped out by it. He was like, "Oh," he kept trying to guess what was going to happen, and he was like, "Oh, those twins are going to be around the corner. Oh, like the ghosts are going to be around the corner. Oh, this is what's going to
Mhm.
happen next. This is what's going to happen next." And so he kept trying to guess what was going to happen, and he really loved it. He was blown away when we got to the part where Wendy finds the book that Jack's been writing. And it
Mhm.
just says over and over again, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. And he was just like, his mind was blown. He was like, what? What? He wrote a whole book and it just says all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Oh, he's crazy.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it's and the thing one of the things that makes that really work is that it's 1980. Like they probably filmed it in 1979. So someone had to type all that out on a typewriter, you know?
Yep.
And there's and the one of the things that makes that sequence work so well is that she just keeps going and keeps going and part of you is just thinking about no one puts in that much work to make to do a scene like this. Someone
Mm-hmm.
had to be typing that for like a week, you know.
Because they're all formatted differently. It's formatted like it's a real book, but it just says all work and no play is makes Jack a dull boy. And some of them are formatted weirdly, but like you can tell, yeah, that was a PA's job.
Yeah, it's like 20 or 30 pages and we just
Mm-hmm.
stay on it.
This is when they have a big fight. She's got a bat because she's worried about the crazy lady who's there at the hotel, but now all of a sudden she's worried about Jack. And this is like the iconic scene of like, give me the bat, give me the bat. I'm not
Mhm.
gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains in.
Uh-huh. And it's one of the it's a Kubrick thing, but just this movie does so well is that it doesn't cut away. It just stays on it keeps on a shot and you're unable to escape the shot. There's cutting creates energy, but it also kind of like cutting to another shot also creates safety,
Yeah.
that you're able to escape a moment and reset and see something else. And there's part of you that wants to cut away for that safety, you know?
Yeah. Oh
But
yeah.
when you're stuck in a shot of him coming up the stairs and you see in the foreground of her waving a bat at you, you just start to build more and more tension, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the danger of these long shots is that it gets boring, but the power of these long shots is that it just gets more tense.
And Jack Nicholson is so unhinged that it's like uncomfortable.
Yeah. You know, so like Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall, obviously, this was a difficult movie to make, and I feel like they deserve more credit than they've probably given. Like, I feel like a lot of the credit for this movie goes to Kubrick, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that Nicholson and Duvall really deserve a lot more credit than they've been given for making this movie work.
Yep. Especially poor Shelley Duvall.
Yeah, but
She's
yeah, I think for both of them that this movie was just intensely difficult to make.
yeah. So she bonks him on the head and hides him in the storage room, which I'm like, okay, that's great. It's got a lock, but like that's where all your food is. So if you can't get out of
Mhm.
here today, you're gonna have to let him out.
Well, they still got a freezer full of meat, so they're gonna have to go full meat.
Just full only frozen meat.
Mhm.
No sides. The title card says it's 4 p.m. Jack is having a nice nap in some piles of salt. Delbert Grady comes and makes fun of him.
I love looking in the storage, like on the shelves of all the old. It's like all the old types of food that you used to eat, like in the 80s or whatever, that your grandma had, like in the
Yeah.
cupboard, like
With like pickles and
Nilla wafers, and like I didn't see them, but something like fig Newtons and things like that, you know.
so there's something in the so there's a whole documentary called Room 237, which is all about like conspiracy theories surrounding this movie. And
Mhm.
one of them is that like it's about stealing the land from the Native Americans, because you can see a can that has a like a Native American icon on it smoking a
Mhm.
pipe, and they're
Mhm.
like, that's a reference to stealing the land from the Native Americans. And it's like, okay, is it? I don't think so.
I feel like building I feel rather than it being a thesis, um I think that people were just casual about
Yeah.
appropriating, and it's like, you know, the whole lobby was full of Navajo and Apache art and putting it on an Indian burial ground. I feel like it was just casual racism, you
Yeah.
know, rather than a consequence of it, you know, of
Hmm.
the things that happen. But yeah, I feel like if I had to explain within what the world tells me of what happened, is that it's not that it was an Indian burial ground, it's that it was a burial ground. And so
Yeah.
and you know, Scatman is talking about how, you know, people have history, places have history. They have like psychic energy, you know? And so this is a place that just a lot of pain and a lot of death have happened, and it just grows. It just has more power the more people
Yeah.
that get sucked into it. And so it's effectively a force of energy, you know?
Right, a force of energy, and then like you leave one family in there for 6 months, and like with just the wom 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 all get centered around them, and you got
Mhm.
one psychic little boy, and then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So there's more red rum, red rum. So here's a argument as to whether or not the ghosts are real. They let him out.
Yes. So that's our proof that the ghosts are real,
Yeah.
because they're able to physicalize and do something. I mean, you can say that it was all in his mind, that he was drinking fake alcohol and he was walking through a party, that he had fake liquid spilled on him, you know, that it's just in his
Mm-hmm.
mind. But the moment they were able to open a door like a velociraptor, then at that point they're real.
Yep. And so here he comes, a chop, chop, chopping. He chops his way through the bathroom. Danny gets away out the bathroom window, but Shelley Duvall is trapped.
Mm-hmm.
That's the here's Johnny scene.
Yeah, and he killed Scatman Crothers.
Yep.
Spoiler alert.
Who comes in a snowcat. So he flies all the way from Miami, rents a snowcat,
Because he
drives all the
cares.
way up, and then immediately as soon as he comes in, he's like, hello, axe in the chest.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So
I have so many regrets.
though they're all running around, they're being chased. Jack has an axe. She's running around, she's hearing chanting, she's seeing skeletons, she sees a furry doing some nefarious deeds in one of the rooms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so at this point we're really kind of letting it all loose and saying that it's not just this one family, it's this whole place.
Yep. Wendy sees more skeletons. She sees the blood elevator. Jack is now chasing Danny through the hedge maze. Danny smartly steps backwards through his footprints for a long way and hides, which means he's able to escape the hedge maze. Danny and Wendy get in the snowcat and they get going, and Jack just stays lost in the hedge maze. And that's where he freezes to death. And then we see he's in a photo from 1921. And this, my son was like, what the heck? How is he in that picture from 1921?
That's right. That's right, 13-year-old.
How is he in the picture from 1921? I don't know. What do you think?
He's always been here.
But he hasn't.
It's supernatural. That's the whole point.
So every time there's been a caretaker, it's been Jack?
No.
No?
The ghost can use Photoshop.
Okay. Well, I think that once he died, he got sucked into the past and became one of the ghosts.
Yeah, it's obviously it transcends normal reality. I wish they would have had the other people that we had seen in the photo
Appear.
Yeah. But,
well,
not
they were
appear,
all...
but they're...
Oh, like Delbert Grady is one of them, and the bartender is one of them, and the furry is one of them.
Yeah, so I'll have to knock that down a grade just because of that. But,
yeah,
that's the way it goes.
So that's The Shining. How do you rate it? And like, are you rating it as a Kubrick film? Are you rating it as an 80s film? Are you rating it as a horror film? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a tough one. You know, I'm gonna have to rate it pretty high.
I rate it pretty high.
Yeah.
I would give it an 8.
I think I'm gonna have to give it a 9 even.
Okay.
And it's not that, you know, it's like you put it up against 9 other 9s, and some are like way more rewatchable, and this is more like I feel like the pinnacle of a type of movie, you know. You know, like in terms of horror or horror suspense or supernatural horror, you know, I guess it would be the category.
Yeah.
I just don't feel like it gets any better than this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and Rocket enjoyed it. I kept waiting for him to get bored and say he didn't want to watch it anymore and then to finish it on my own, but like he was like in it to win it.
That's good. He's not like, where are all the creepy speed ramped nuns with like dark, you know, eyes and CGI mouths and things like that. But
nope. And I kept asking him, I was like, are we still watching this? Are you still into it? And he's like, yeah, I want to see what happens.
Cool. Good. I'm glad.
Yeah. So I think it holds up, you know, I think it holds up for the next generation in a way that like, you don't have to necessarily say, oh, this is a movie of the 80s. It belongs in the 80s. I think it's kind of timeless.
Good. Yeah, I think one thing is that it's very straightforward. It's very simple. There's not a lot of subplots. It's not that we cut off to here. Like, it's kind of relentlessly moving forward.
Yeah, but it's also like there's so many like conspiracy theories about this movie and like weird rabbit holes that you can go down about this movie. Like there is that whole
Mhm.
documentary Room 237 where like people are like this is about the moon landing and like his little Apollo 11 sweater proves it and this is about,
Mhm.
all of this like really really crazy stuff. I heard once that people did a screening of it where they played it backwards and forwards at the same time,
Mhm.
which I don't understand what that's about, but like there's a lot of hoopla about this movie
If it
as
keeps him
well.
out of trouble.
So you give it a 9?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to give it a 9. I would put this in my top 5 of horror films, and that
Okay.
would be of, like, favorite horror films. Like, if I had to go with, like, what is the most well-crafted, then it'd be higher, but I would definitely put it in the top 5, I feel.
Okay, I think that's great. I think
Mhm,
it belongs up there for sure.
mhm.
And definitely in terms of being a classic. Um Awesome. Do you have a deep cut recommendation?
Well, yeah, so, I mean, so it's not this, but we should talk about that there's a sequel to this movie.
Called Doctor
Um,
Sleep?
yeah, Doctor Sleep, which is very different, but also very much. It's I probably I don't know. It's probably based more off of the book,
It is.
but it uses the imagery of the movie, which is good. But
Mhm.
yeah, no. So that would be an interesting direction to go. Mine would be more. I mean, honestly, like if you really enjoyed the the style and the pace of this movie, I would explore more of Kubrick's films,
Okay.
especially like 2001. But if I had to kind of go deeper in terms of in the direction of kind of a lucid experience, if you dug the idea of feeling like there was a certain dreamlike quality, and again, recommending this when you're a little sleepy,
Yeah.
when you're kind of letting it in through and you're dropping your guard and letting it kind of exist. There's a great movie that's also very dreamlike, obviously because it's called Dreams.
Okay.
But the full title is Akira Kurosawa's Dreams.
Okay.
Um, and so this is a movie that was made in the 90s by the legendary Japanese filmmaker Akira Kurosawa. Not a ton of people are into this movie because it's basically like 10 short stories, but they're all basically dreams. They're
Okay.
not it's not like the through line is that they're effectively they themselves each little story is a dream, and you can conceive that it's the dream from the same person or the dream of the filmmaker himself, you know
Mhm.
but there's a similar quality of a lucid experience, you know,
Cool.
and some of them are nightmares, or some of them are just existential issues. I wouldn't consider it scary at all. This is
Okay.
much more of an art film or a foreign film, but yeah, Kurosawa's done a lot of cool cinema, The Seven Samurai, Yojimbo,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
which have been adapted into things like The Magnificent Seven and A Fistful of Dollars, which people recognize. But yeah, I'd recommend Akira Kurosawa's Dreams.
That's a great recommendation. I also went with something that was like just had the same mood, I think. And so I tried to pick
Hmm.
a horror movie I'd seen recently that gave me that same like creepy foreboding feeling.
Hmm.
So I want to recommend a movie called The Night House.
Mm.
Did you see it?
No, no.
It's just
Or have I?
it's pretty creepy. It's about a lady who lives in a house and she finds a house across the lake that's the exact same
Yeah.
as her house but in reverse.
This is with Rebecca Hall.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
And it's just a little creepy and moody, so I wanted to recommend that as like another horror movie that's not necessarily like jump scares around every corner, but it's like creepy and there's something supernatural there, but is it real or is it not? So
Mm-hmm.
that's my deep cut recommendation.
Cool.
Yeah. So here's the cool thing is that now on our page on True Story FM, it's got links, dynamic links in all of our show notes to where you can find both Nathan and I out in the real world. You can find me, of course, at the Neighborhood Comedy Theater in downtown Mesa, Arizona. And if you want a link to that, just go to the show notes on True Story FM. Nathan, what will people find if they want to try and find Squishy Studios and your latest work?
Yeah, so the latest thing that Squishy Studios has done is our low budget our feature film, The Last Movie Ever Made, which is currently playing at film festivals. We're
And
going to be
destroying and winning awards left, right, and sideways.
uh, um and so we're coming up, we're going to be playing at Film Quest and the Twin Cities Film Festival in October. And so, and I think it's late October, so hopefully this will be out in time. But to a lot of these film festivals, there's an online portion to it. So even if you're not in Minnesota or if you're not in Utah for Film Quest, it's possible so I would check the film fests themselves. So Film Quest and Twin Cities Film Festival, that there's a way that you can actually during the film festival watch the movie online if you buy a ticket. So
Awesome.
so it is possible if you're in other parts of the country, you can see our movie, The Last Movie Ever Made.
Awesome. And you should definitely do that. Thank you so much for listening. If you want a little bit more content, me and Nathan are just going to have a little chat after the pod. You can get that by signing up to be a member at True Story FM on any of the pages for any of the pods, on the page for this pod, on just the general page. You'll see links there to click to become a member. It's just $5 a month, and you can get all the bonus content and you can get the episodes a week early. Exciting. Thank you so much for listening. When you're out there in the world, please keep the most excellent 80s movies motto in mind. Be excellent to each other and party
Party
on,
on, dudes.
dudes.